Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bitwig Studio and Music Production. This is lesson 3.11, and we finally reached our first creation project video. So in this video, I'm going to lay down the parameters for making your first creation project, and then I'm just going to talk a little bit about maybe some ways you might want to go about it. But there are no rights, there are no wrongs in this, especially because we're focusing on creation. We're not focusing on production. There doesn't have to be a light at the end of the tunnel. There doesn't have to be any sort of pressure on you that you need to make something to sound like insert genre here or insert artist here. So this can really be all about you and just how your mind works. And also when you're learning a software, like you're learning Bitwig right now, starting out with creation can be a lot more helpful than starting with production because you're still not familiar with what everything is going to do when you click it in here. I know for me, I still am not sure what's going to happen every time, and I've been in this software for quite a bit of time so far. So this is what I call the 5-sample challenge. And originally, I was going to make this a lot harder for you guys, but I've decided to be nice. So in your 5 samples, you can choose anything that's built in here with Bitwig or anything that you could download from the package manager here, okay? So you're allowed to download all of these loops, all of these samples. But what you have to do is you have to sit down and you have to pick just 5. Now, I'm going to be nice, and if you want, you're allowed to use a drum loop as one of your 5 samples. So if you want something that has multiple hits in it, that's fine. I'll let you do it, but only one, because I know a lot of you might want to work more with drums and percussion, where for me, I may not go that route and I may not pull anything out that has a drum loop, but I understand that some of you may want to do that. So you just have to pick 5 of those samples, and then using the parameters that we've shown so far, you have to come up with and make a track. So what you're not allowed to do is you're not allowed to use any of the built-in instruments. You're not allowed to even use any effects. Okay, so nothing should be showing up here in our device panel. It's going to be all using, let's just pull something in here. It's going to be all about messing with some of these parameters down here when we open up our editor view. So we have things like the stretch, the onsets, the pitch, the pan, the gain, the event. And then if we go into the inspector view, we also have control over some things like legato, reverse, duplicate, and then our scaling functions as well. You can, of course, use things like your razor tool, your eraser, your pen. You can draw in automation. Some of the stuff that I showed you in the first sort of series, I guess the DJ series, where we opened up and messed around with some automation, that's totally fine, but it's going to only be able to be things like the pan or the volume that you can automate in that way. But otherwise, you can make your automations here with your clip. If you want, you're allowed to go into the clip launcher and you can make various scenes and you can launch them and play them back live. That's totally fine. For now, though, I would say try to avoid using the follow actions, or what do they call them in here? They call them the next actions. Try to avoid using those because we're going to do a whole entire project using the next action. So for now, avoid that, but everything else is totally fair game in here. Pan, pitch, whatever, messing with different tempos, changing the mode here, all of that is totally fine. So you might start with 5 samples, but end up with 150 different sounds. You know, that is totally acceptable. That is totally fine. And really, that's all there is to this assignment. That's all there is to this project. It's purely creation-based. It's about seeing what you can come up with when you're really, really limited. And a lot of people would look to me and say, well, why would you ever want to do this? What would be the point of making a creation using just 5 samples? And I hope the answer to that is kind of self-evident. There are so many choices we have today. I mean, just look at the number of choices we have, 4,886, not to mention all of our devices, not to mention all of our external plugins. There are just so many choices today that knowing where to start and actually starting a creation is very hard. So what this is going to force you to do, and what I would recommend, is you set a timer for 15 minutes, you go through samples and you kind of pick out your favorites, and after that 15 minutes is up, Just pick out your favorite 5 from there and get to work and see what you can come up with. You can make an entire composition in a day if you want to here. You can do it in an hour. You can do it in 25 minutes. And really, there's not going to be one that's better than another. If you wanted to, you could make something production based. It wouldn't be too difficult to take 5 samples, find one bass stab, find one melody stab, find one drum loop, and make an entire track just using that, because we have control of pitch, we have control of pan, we have those controls on a audio event by audio event basis. However, for me, I know I'm going to get a little more experimental, and I'm going to try to take some of these controls that we have in here with the stretching and with the onsets, and I'm going to really go crazy with them and just see what can I get, what can I really push out of this program when I'm this limited, what sort of sonic palette can I come up with. And that's really what this is all about, and it's about being able to finish something, start to finish, regardless of how much experience you have working in here. And that leads me to my next point. And I'm just going to tell you guys a quick story, and I've kind of told it before already, but the very first assignment I ever had was, we went into class and the instructor was there, the professor was there, and for the most part, he just talked about sort of the evolution of electronic music, and we were listening to some stuff, and obviously we ended up listening to things like John Cage's Silence Piece, and we were listening to Stockhausen and some of his early music concrete, et cetera, and we're sitting there, we're listening to it, we're discussing it, and then the last 10 minutes of class, he hands out a thumb drive, he says, okay, everybody install these, grab these 10 files. So we all had our laptops there, and we plugged in the thumb drive, and we pulled those 10 files out, put them on our desktop, and he was like, okay, go home, work with Reason, and next week, see what you come up with. And at that point, I was like, whoa, what is going on? I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know how to use Reason. Reaper. I've never used Reaper before. I mean, nobody really had, because it was a pretty new program at that time. But everyone did it. Everybody went back home, made something with it, even if you didn't know what any of this stuff was doing. And the next week we came back and we all listened to what we'd come up with. And it was amazing to see just how different directions everybody went in using those same 10 samples. And it's the same concept here, only now we've shrunk it to 5 samples. And I will allow you to use a drum loop, which we didn't have. But what you're going to notice is that you can come up with some crazy things. And if you took those same 5 samples and you did it again, you'd come up with something very different. If you took those same 5 samples and did it again, you'd come up with something radically different each and every time. And I think that's really, really cool. And that's what creation is all about. We're not worried about the result. We're worried about creating and just coming up with something. Whether we like it or we hate it, that's okay, because there's not really going to be any judgments to say, well, yours was worse than mine, because it's not. We're all just making different choices. It's all about choice here, not about result. So that's what I want you to do, and you can take this in any direction you want. You can make this incredibly experimental, or you can do it in a production-based context. So you could try to make a track that sounds like a trance song, or that sounds like a house song, or it sounds like a pop song, but you're limited to 5 samples. And if someone's able to do that and come up with something, really professional, I'd be quite impressed. But it is possible, because we do have enough controls and we have good enough samples in here that something like that would be possible. But at the same time, you could give me the same 5 samples you were using, and I would go in a completely different direction. The other thing I like about a assignment like this is it helps people who get burned out. And there are really great producers out there, and I'm using the term producer, who get burned out because there's so much pressure. The pressure is on each and every time to deliver a production that gets people dancing, that people really like and respond to. With this, there is no pressure. And not only that, but the playing field is totally level. So if you've been doing this for 30 years or you've been doing it for 2 days, we're all going to come up with something, and really there is no way of saying somebody else's is better than anything else that anybody else has created, right? So that is the idea behind this project, and it's something I would encourage you to do like once a month or once every 2 months or once every 2 or 3 weeks. just because it's a great exercise for laying something down, and you can do it in an hour, you can do it in 15 minutes, or you can spend an entire week. But at the end of the day, it's going to force you to create, and it's going to force you to go start to finish. So throw convention, throw all that right out the window right now, because it's not important. The conventions that you're so used to and that you want to try and produce someday don't matter at this stage. And it's just about getting something down, and it's just about getting to the point where we can click file export and share what we've come up with each other. So I hope these first 10 videos have been quite helpful. And in the next video, we're going to see what I was able to come up with. So thanks a lot for watching, and you'll hear from me again in the next lesson. Take care.